Gosh, you've been doing this almost from the beginning, huh? The
Almost since
Esalen meetings?
Wagner. Yeah, almost since Wagner.
Yeah, yeah.
A year or two afterwards.
Uh, James is an old trooper, kind of our next generation of free association people, and it's always a delight to see what James comes up with to talk about. Today it's going to be death and uncertainty. So, James, take it away, and we'll go over the 6 o'clock time frame a little bit as we all got started.
Thank you. So, a brief introduction is that I think this paper, this talk is probably not as good as it could be. And that's because I procrastinate. And that's what I want to explore is how it is that that's possible with something that matters, it's something that's important, and how death comes into that, and uncertainty. Well, Montaigne says that truly, if there were no death, it would be necessary to invent it. So much less bearable would be life without it. Of all the benefits that the gods have conferred upon humanity, the greatest of all, in my opinion, is death. This topic, for me, has not been easy to write about. There's an obvious reason for that, and one that is less so. The obvious reason is that it summons the experience of loss. My grandmother saying goodbye on a bed in hospice, my parents aging toward their inevitable deaths, and the knowledge that my dog, Teddy, still a puppy, is likely to die before my eyes in a cold vet's office, if all goes well, a mere 15 years from now. The deaths of those I love saddens and scares me, and thinking about death necessitates me thinking about that. However, considering the deaths of others is not our primary aim. Instead, I am supposed to be talking about my own mortality. How do I deal with the fact that I am going to die? Compared with the experiences of loss about the deaths of others that I can recount from direct experience, the question of my death is even more impossible to answer. Epicurus said, "Death is nothing to us, for when we exist, death is not present, and when death is present, we do not exist." On the one hand, what Epicurus said seems to be true to those who rely on the 5 common senses of perception, that there is in fact no person to experience their own death. But on the other hand, we are left to wonder how it is that this nothing, which Epicurus says death is, could come to mean so much to us. How can nothing mean something? And not just something, but a tremendous amount. Death may mean more to us than nearly any other single thing that can be named. And yet it is nothing. It doesn't make sense. Can we fear something which we have no experience of? Or, like a child afraid of the dark, do we need to first project something monstrous that is known and painful into the unknown? I am left with an impossible question. What does death mean to me? If I approach it through my direct experience, I am left with 2 things. Answers about the death of others, of what the death of others has meant to me, and what finding a monster in the dark could mean to me. This may mean that I cannot talk about, that I can only talk about loss, but not about death itself. That this is a dead end, so to speak. A logical puzzle that results from the abstraction of death, a rationalization of the issue. It's a way of trying to substitute for a lack of a direct experience. I do not know what death is nor what comes after. Fear of death might involve projecting pains of loss that have occurred in life and an instantiation of certainty onto that which cannot be made certain. This is all to say that whatever people believe about death may be an attempt to make clear something which cannot be experienced. Whether one believes that death is good, bad, or nothing, heaven, hell, or the future barred, as Sartre put it, it is tempting to make it clear so as to refute the unrelenting uncertainty of it. But I am less concerned about how to deal with the fear of death than I am in understanding how my death helps me to live well. After all, nearly everything about death is uncertain. It seems we can only be confident about one thing. Death is a limitation on life as we know it. Death is a limitation on our time. It is our deadline. We don't have only so long, and I have only so long, so I will get to my point. We need death to live. Without death, I think we would procrastinate endlessly on all the things that matter most to us. However, somehow, despite the fact that we all die, we do procrastinate. I imagine that each of us can recognize times when we have put off something important to us, when we have forestalled a romantic opportunity in the hope of finding someone better tomorrow, when we have delayed telling a friend what is on our hearts today, when we have caved to anxiety and refused a great opportunity, soothing ourselves with the idea of a better, easier opportunity tomorrow. Procrastination is a form of anxious avoidance of something that feels risky, and it is only possible when there's a denial of the deadline. And I speak from experience, of course. When I was in college, I would do everything literally the night it was like a 10-page paper, you know. I would start at 10 p.m. and I would do the math, like, you know, I could write a page an hour, you know. If I stay up and take all these energy drinks, I'm sure I could do it. But how did I even get to that point? It was just always that, you know, the deadlines, it's in the future. It's in the future. It's over there, it's over there, it's over there. And somehow it just gets tighter and tighter. And you know how I discovered I could write a page in an hour was just because I squeezed it that tight, you know. I discovered it, you know. um, in other words, each of us is capable of forestalling the pursuit of the most meaningful aspects of our lives because we have developed an overconfident sense of certainty about our deaths. Heidegger thought that very few people believed that they were going to die, that they actually believed it. That would be an incredibly rare and sort of lucky thing for somebody to have a moment where they might really be struck by the fact that, oh my God, I really am going to die. The rest of us who aren't so lucky to have that moment and be transformed by it don't quite believe it. We say we do, we say we think about it, or we distract ourselves from it, but we always kind of evade its existence somehow. And I think that's probably me as well. You know, I think I relate to that. I think about death a lot, but I have to say, you know, I do think that I don't consciously fear death, but I think it's because Heidegger's got me pegged. I don't truly believe I will die, even when I think I do. It rarely strikes me with the gravity that I imagine as its due. Instead of submitting to the truth of my death, I find that I do a number of other things with it. I think most people do some of these as well. A few defenses against death. One can believe, as Epicurus did, that I will not be there to experience my death, and one can use that to believe that belief as a trite way of avoiding the implications of a limit on one's time. One can believe that they know what death is, its eternity, reincarnation, heaven, hell, or nothing, and thereby take away some of death's sting. In this formulation, death is not uncertain, it's known. In the case of religious people, death is just an illusion or a doorway to another life. In the case of the atheist, the meaning of one's actions is confined to this life, has no chance of echoing into an afterlife. And perhaps that's a relief. However, we are endlessly conflicted about death due to the duality captured in Hamlet. That death brings the possibility of ending suffering, but that its uncertainty allows us to imagine ongoing pain. To remind you of the famous speech, to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream. There's the rub, for in the sleep of death what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. And later in the speech, he does sort of entertain that our conscience might bring us to imagine certain dreams or nightmares at the end of life, project that into the end of life, that it's almost something we can't quite help. We don't fully believe that death is the end, even if you think you do. You're never certain about it. You're never certain about it. But let me get to my point. I think there is one defense against death that is more common than all the rest. The belief that death is far off, that death could not come for us at any time. Frankly, for all the talk I hear about death, no matter how old or how young or how sick, and I'm sure there's an exception with someone who's really terminal, but in my experience, people do not think they could die today. It's always tomorrow or the next day, and much more likely some indeterminate time. It's way over there. So while I'm as defended about death as anyone else, there are moments when I benefit from the awareness of death's potential imminence, along with my powerlessness over that fact. When I am awake to this quality of death, I love with abandon, speak with an open heart. I'm willing to risk nearly anything for something or someone that matters to me. I'm more courageous, basically. I go for it. This quality of potential imminence presses in on me every moment that I remember it. I realize that just about anything could kill me, and there's only so much I can do about that. It allows me to live simultaneously as though everything matters, and also that nothing is all that serious relative to my death. In short, I see death as Don Juan once told Carlos Castaneda to see it, as my advisor. As Heidegger has revealed to me, I struggle to believe that I really will die. So I imagine death's presence, so I combat that by using my imagination, as though to imagine death's presence really is close at hand, ready to take me at any moment. In doing so, I endeavor to make each choice as a choice onto death. Each movement is part of my potential last dance in the face of death, that all my choices are made with the knowledge that death can come at any time. Even now, if you could imagine it, each of us sits here, and I suspect that things could change dramatically if you could imagine that death could take you any moment. And perhaps it sounds like a terrifying thing, but it's just something that you don't have control over. It is the fact. And so would that change how you experience things now, and would it change how you I don't think it really dictates how things will be. It doesn't say you should live this way or that way. But to me, it changes things. I use this with my patients all the time. Oh, actually, it reminds me of a great story. I was in supervision with Michael Thompson once, and I was going on about a patient where, in a way that I had been taught to do, to present the case. Just covering what was the presenting issue and what this person's age was or something like that. And I remember there was nothing I experienced as significant in talking about. I was doing what thought I should be doing. And looking back, I remember that Michael, I think, seemed bored of all of this, to my mind. But one day, multiple days, he would pick up a pen, and then he would often ask me, "What is with this pen? It's so heavy, and why would they make a pen so heavy?" And it would always annoy me because I'm trying to talk about my patient, But then one day and I don't know if this was intentional or an over attribution on my part, but he said, I suppose one thing this pen would be good for, I learned in Vietnam, you just go for the jugular, you could use this pen as like a weapon, to this, as like self-defense. You could use this pen for that. It's heavy like that. And then, again, it may be an over attribution, but I attributed to that all this meaning about it, that basically I was wasting my time blabbing on about these insignificant details. What was the point? Get to the point. And actually, it seemed to me like, but it seemed to me like it was sort of like, it was a theme that came up in other places around the supervision, that with your patients, you have this opportunity to be the person to ask those questions, to say those difficult things to them, to speak truth that would be uncomfortable, to reflect experiences that other people would be afraid to speak to, not to dance around it and imagine that, tomorrow, next week, if it's occurring, that's your chance to say something, to do something about it. And so ever since then, I think my clinical work has been influenced by that sensibility that we are at the edge of death together. This could be our last time seeing each other. And, now is the time to say it. So I'll just end with this quote from The Idiot with Dostoevsky. It's about a young man who had his sentence read to him. He wasn't more than 27 years old. He was very smart, very pale, his lips trembling and his eyes staring wide open. They led him out and tied him to a post. When he was being tied up, he said to one of the people standing near him, a priest, "Do not bother with prayers. Just go on talking so I can hear your voice." He did not want to die. There were about 5 minutes left to live. He said to himself, "What if I did not have to die? What if life were given back to me? What infinity! It would all be mine. Then I would turn every minute into an age. Nothing would be wasted. Every minute would be accounted for. Every minute would be used. And I would have to account for every single minute to myself." Thank you.
That's my brother. Well, I forgot that pin story.
Yes.
Yeah, that's, I really liked the point you're making, James. We don't really believe we're going to die. And but I think there are moments, that we have like what we think might be a near-death experience. Last year I had two of them. I had a car wreck and totaled my car. And for just a few seconds, I thought I could die. Just that, like Heidegger. Suddenly you realize you're mortal, and it could all be over in a flash. And there was something else. Of course, I can't remember the other incident. But
moments,
yeah, but we just have. Oh yeah, I remember. I was in Hawaii, and the surf was really rough, and I noticed there weren't very many people in the ocean, and I just love going to the ocean, which you never really get to do here. And so I went ahead and went in, and like I've done a million times. And I went out a ways, and then I decided it was time to come back in, and I couldn't seem to get to the beach. The tides were so strong, they kept pulling me. And I started getting really tired. And I thought, God, I could really drown. This is how people drown. They don't have the energy to fight it anymore. And so I started going down, instead of trying to go to the beach to let it carry me downstream much more. And I gradually, was able to get off. So, I think it does, these things happen, don't they? And then we forget them. It's over, thank goodness, and you don't give it another thought.
James, that was fabulous. It was just so cogent and lyrical and intelligent. I think that, I have had experiences, car wrecks and so forth, where having those near death and you're in that moment. But I think more importantly than that is you can practice. There are ways to practice staying in the truth of I'm going to die, and I could die any minute. And what I loved is how you linked death and uncertainty. I think where we, in a practical way, one can get stuck not even believing in uncertainty. For example, we all think we're going to get up and go to dinner, and then we're going to have a dance scene tonight. Maybe. Anything could happen, and our addiction to certainty is very linked to that. But I do think that it is critical, and many people are doing it. There are many practices, indigenous cultures and everywhere these days, of practicing your own death and facing it. And then it gradually builds a capacity to live each moment as though it's your last. And it can be done. It's not impossible.
Yes.
It's not impossible. And it's not about, I find, it's not about whether I fear death or not. I mean, I don't know, But I do know I'm going to die, and that each moment is precious, and I live that way. And that didn't happen by accident. That takes some real work.
Yeah. I want to say a couple things about that. For one is, the question of fearing death, they say to philosophize is to prepare to learn how to die. Montaigne had an essay called that, and apparently that was a Greek sensibility for a while. And it just struck me that there was this glorification at some points and by some people of a peaceful and tranquil death, and it just struck me that it doesn't seem to me all that essential. How miserable I look at the end. Maybe is not the biggest deal to me, but the other things is I really agree with you also about, I think whether you're able to sustain a constant belief, a sincere belief of that you're going to die is, I think, questionable. I don't know, but I think, and I'm not saying you're saying so, I guess it seems to me that it may be also helpful or necessary that we forget sometimes, that we allow.
Right.
You
It's
know.
not about dwelling on death, and it's not even a belief, because a belief is to imply that it might not happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to believe, it's like I believe in heaven. I have faith. I mean, it's just it's a way of being. And it has more to do with me as the certainty aspect of it. Is that I definitely practice that life is uncertain.
And I think that actually is, I was tempted to go into a second section of the talk, which is that when death is sort of this, when death is, I don't know, to put it glibly, like the ultimate uncertainty, the ultimately unknown kind of, then everything else that is uncertain is sort of, your relationship with death is sort of implicated in all other relationships to uncertainty.
Yeah.
So death is then, if you resist that uncertainty in death,
Exactly.
you're going to do that in a lot of other places, and
That's
you're going
it.
to control other people, and you're going to be, guarded, and you're going to be trying to, forfend those uncertain possibilities everywhere, because you've already shut down your relationship to death.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think that's really well
That's-
said.
that's really well
That's
said.
exactly right.
Yeah.
I would say.
So the practice is really accepting uncertainty, but I mean that's the ultimate uncertainty. And I also, what I've experienced on all the work I've done with people around death and practicing your death is helping people understand that this so-called terror we have of death, the existential terror, is from childhood when the initial separation. There's terror for a baby, but we're grown-up, resilient adults. We don't have to keep calling it terror. It's just, okay, it's what it is. And so I believe you can build the capacity, the resilience for holding what as infants we couldn't hold. And so it's something about, there's a maturity around it. There's a emotional maturity around accepting uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think in
And then Nina after. Yeah.
oh, I'm so sorry.
No.
In that dynamic relationship with not knowing, there's also this energy of chaos and surrender. There are things in life that are chaotic that I can't control, like the ocean. It's a great example. That practicing being in chaos, and that the dance is a great way to do that. Practicing being in chaos. Can I show up? Can I be present? Can I continue? Do I have the endurance? And the wisdom, Michael had the wisdom to not fight against the current, to actually ride the chaos of the current to a new place. And so there is a practice in, again, dance is one example, but how do I meet the chaos in my life? The places in which I can't control. How do I have a dynamic relationship, a presence of mind and body to be in not knowing? And that, I think, is exactly what you're talking about can I engage with the uncertainty of
Yes.
when am I going to die?
And
What's that
actually-
going to be like?
And also, I think that it just that this whole connection with uncertainty, I think there's a reason that also leads, I think, to your relationship to death may also have certain implications about how you love as well, because I think loving well has a lot to do with letting someone be and not controlling and not resisting the uncertainty implicit in the relationship, and that is all very threatening. It's dangerous as well, and so if I think there's some relationship there between your relationship to the uncertainty of death and also love.
I think that's absolutely true.
And Nina?
Well, as you were talking, I found myself reflecting on my internship, which was in a hospital AIDS unit in New York. This is near the beginning of the epidemic, far before a cocktail. And so, all these guys were going to die. And there was a lot of variation in the way dealing with it, but a lot of them basically came to terms with the fact that they were going to die. And the shift, the shift in their attention was not so much about the death. It was about the loss of their lives. It was about their concern that they didn't want to be overcome with what was then called AIDS-related dementia, where they felt like they had more fear of that than they did of death, because that was sort of, it was like they'd be living but they'd still be dead, and they wouldn't be able to recognize what was important and meaningful. And then often there were so many fantasies about, their ideal death and who they would want, and and often, sometimes there weren't, but some of the most meaningful things that I think you would speak to the connection of love, were there. Sometimes this prompted family reconciliations, where families who had rejected them because of their so-called lifestyle in the face of their impending loss were able to sort of come forth with love. And so it made the contemplation of death so much more poignant, because they were now holding the love and its potential loss. So I'm rambling a bit, but I was sort of remembering all of this as you were talking.
Oh, yeah.
A totally different topic. You spoke about procrastination. It's kind of a defense mechanism against death, procrastinating what we need to do. But then I thought, procrastination is also a way of accepting death for me, because sometimes I just go for immediate gratification, thinking, if I die tomorrow, I want to have fun tonight. I don't want to deal with my taxes,
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's maybe different. Yeah, it's a different kind, totally. Like when, like I just read something from Montaigne. He said, like one lesson about life is, all these like trivial matters, they could be done tomorrow, and that, if anything, is sort of different. What you and him are saying is like, the things that really matter to you, if anything, the pleasure of that moment, that's what matters to you. That's what you would want to do in the face of your death.
That's what gets chosen.
Yeah.
An immediate gratification.
Yeah.
Sort of maybe even infantile place, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like procrastination of like taxes or homework or something is different than
lighter word, deferral.
What's that? Deferral.
Word, deferral.
Yeah. There you
Even
go.
something like really important and emotional. Let's say talking about, an argument you had with a friend, and you really want to call them. You think you should call them, but then, I'll do it tomorrow. Then tomorrow comes, and
Well, if I think somehow, like, if you're making that choice in the face of with the sense that like I could die. Do I choose to talk to my friend, or do I choose this? There's not a right answer. It's just that's your choice in the face of the fact that it's not like you're gonna have endless time to do all of it.
Can I say though that I think it's the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and they say don't panic, and it's very important. Listen, and I was thinking about how that's one of the problems. I mean, if you focus on death a lot, you can panic and you will not be doing the affairs of the day. And it reminds me, what you're talking about reminds me of I think it's Epictetus, who said, ancient Greek, they said, you guys shouldn't worry about death. You need to reframe it. We just waste so much time in our lives. And the answer is not to waste time. Don't be diverted by any of that stuff, and just kind of carry on, and don't wait, be aware that that your life is is limited, and you need to not waste time. I don't know. I think there is something, and you're thinking, and there is something very much to that. But I think that when you are confronted with death in a real way, or the potential of death, like if you're very ill, say for yourself, you've got a diagnosis of something, and then the experience of anything like that is just that you get sort of plummeted into some other world. It's not panic exactly, but it's just different, and you feel very insecure. And I was thinking of I think it was in Henry V. I think in Agincourt, I think it was that, where a horse, my kingdom for a horse. It's like the king has got everything, and all he needs is a horse to save him. And when you're right at death's door, you're in this different realm. You don't care about all these other things. You've just got this kind of one thing that maybe if it could save you, that would be fantastic.
You've given me. I think that you're raising a question that I think refines what I'm trying to say, because I don't. I think the point is certainly not to worry about dying, and I think that's maybe a distinction. That to consider death as being there, and capable of taking you, is not the same as being oriented towards resisting it or trying to control it. I think part of what I also mean to emphasize is that the awareness of death's presence and being able to take you at any moment has to come along with your ability to acknowledge that you have relatively little power over when it will take you, and to be able to reckon with the limited power you have to resist it. So if you're overly worried about it, or just constantly obsessing over how many supplements you can take, or these sort of like impotent measures, to forestall it. I mean, by all means, take the supplements, but just there just doesn't. There's an impotence, and if you think about death without reckoning with that limitation to do something about it, then maybe you just worry about it, and in worrying you're trying to control it, and always you become maybe even overly paranoid about protecting yourself at all costs and never letting it happen. That's the opposite of what I would be wanting to suggest.
I just want to go back to a procrastination
Yeah.
issue a bit that we're not brought up, that there's a distinction between delaying something and procrastinating. And it's something Lacan once talked about, that you delay things that you don't want to do. But when you delay something you desire, that's procrastinating. That's totally different. It's like, I don't know how many of you saw the Ingmar Bergman movie, The Seventh Seal, which opens with he's a knight on the Crusades, and his ship's washed ashore, and death is on the shore. Guy dressed in black, and he says, "It's your time," and the knight doesn't want to die. He says, "I still have something I need to do before I die." And they played a game of chess. Death said, "If you win, I'll give you a little bit more time." So of course he does win the game. And so that's delaying something that he didn't want. He didn't want to die. But that wouldn't be procrastinating. So it is a good enigma. Why would we delay something that we really want?
Yeah.
Not that that was you were.
Yeah,
That's what you were getting at.
Yeah, I think there are probably more reasons than I explored. One of them is just that you're forced to sort of imagine that you have more time,
Mm-hmm.
but the other
maybe you're buying some immortality or something.
yeah. I mean, in my mind, like very familiar with the homework kind of procrastination. You know that. School did matter to me in some way, even though maybe I didn't want to do it. I wished I didn't have to or something. But the way time stretched on, how you could be down to the last 2 hours, and somehow in your head, every minute of those 2 hours was going to be exceedingly productive. You just, all of a sudden, each minute blows up into larger and larger quantities of capacity, and it just magic, in your mind. Of course, it doesn't always work out. But the other reason would be, that it is a neurotic thing, right? And I was kind of suggesting that if we felt that we were really immortal, would we struggle to do things that mattered to us? I think maybe a limit on time is kind of foundational, because everything that matters to us is going to make us anxious. So I think that's why we procrastinate, is because we're anxious about it, because we're afraid of, why do I procrastinate on the talk? Because I'm anxious about it, because I think it matters. It's a way of not putting all my chips in, holding back a little bit. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, David.
Excuse me. It was so concise and so eloquent. Next thing I knew was like you came screeching up to the finish line with this like fully formed thought. It was really beautiful.
Thank you.
I saw this one caption cartoon the other day, psychoanalytic forum, and the Grim Reaper's on the couch, and the caption is, "What do you mean this is your last session?" The analyst was saying. But all this talk about, okay, if I can reckon with death and accept it, but not worry about it, it's not a belief, it's like I'm going to die. That somehow then this points to a way to live. Mm-hmm. Why not? How does that then mean you live a better life or a fuller life or a more meaningful life? Why not just start day drinking? Like Bukowski style, 10 a.m. beer. Or is there a wrong way to live? Is there a way you're supposed to do it? Every minute counts. What you said is so beautiful. I'm not even disagreeing, but it's, who cares? Mm-hmm. Whether you're going to die for your friends or you become more, whether it's productive or generative, loving, bold, happy. Mm-hmm. What's the difference?
Mm-hmm. And the fact that you're gonna die, right? You're gonna die, and you'll be dead. So.
And it's fully accepted. No misgivings. Is that possible? Just live a non.
I guess
meaningful life or something.
I guess to me, it's not something I fully maybe can explain even to myself, but I think when I'm aware that death is potentially imminent, the choice I make after that is never in bad faith with myself at that point. It's always the choice I make from there is just definitely out of desire rather than in sort of resisting or putting off something. And does that make it more meaningful? Not by any cosmic standard, that I know of, but it just makes it in line with what I what matters to me at that
Yeah.
time. Whereas otherwise, I think, without that, it's very possible and plenty of experience not doing that, acting in bad faith with myself in some way, or just kind of doing something at odds with what I want.
Yeah.
But when it's really there, there's no way I'm going to waste time, at least by my own standards.
But the day drinking analogy might not be in someone's bad faith if that's what they want to do, right?
No, yeah.
So it's like it either makes you live more in accordance with your values, or have a radical transformation and change those values.
Sweet.
Yes.
No taxes, day drinking.
Right.
Done.
Caleb, no need to get defensive. It's okay to
False dichotomy.
And always bring a towel. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Always carry a towel with you.
Nina.
Just sort of just a little about that. What was sort of a joke among these guys with AIDS is that like they all went and maxed out their credit cards because it's like, well, if I'm gonna die, I might as well just like enjoy myself while I'm doing it.
Wow.
And then my sister knows somebody who thought he was going to die, and then the cocktail came along, and now he's in all this debt.
Oh my God.
Catastrophic debt, you know. So, yeah, it goes both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Same
see, death is so uncertain. Even when you're terminal, it may not come.
Taxes are certain.
Taxes.
Not if you're really wealthy, they're not.
That's a threshold to break. That's a long ways away.
Well, so it's 6 o'clock.
Thank you, Jim.
Great, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you.